Engines idled in the dark. A line of cars stretched down a suburban highway in New Jersey, headlights glowing like a river of fireflies. Drivers leaned against their doors, sipping from steaming thermoses, breath fogging in the November chill. Mothers wrapped blankets around their children in back seats. Radios crackled with late-night news, oil shortages, embargo, rising prices. At the front of the line, the neon sign of a small gas station buzzed faintly. Inside, the owner, Carl Benson, wiped sweat from his brow though the air was cold. He had received half his usual fuel delivery. He knew it would be gone before sunrise. He looked at the sea of cars, at the faces staring through frosted windshields, and he felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. It was 1973, and in America gasoline had suddenly become more precious than gold. For decades, Americans had lived as if fuel were infinite. Cars grew bigger, engines louder, highways longer. Gasoline wasn't just fuel, it was freedom. Now that freedom was trapped in endless lines, in ration cards, in fights breaking out at pumps. What no one in that line could fully see was that this crisis had begun thousands of miles away, in deserts where oil was power and politics was war. But they could feel it, in the long wait, the rising anger, the creeping fear that something in the American way of life had broken. In the years after the Second World War, America was a nation addicted to motion. The suburbs exploded outward from every city. Families bought homes with neat lawns and two-car garages. And into those garages rolled the symbols of prosperity: Chevrolets, Buicks, Cadillacs. They were massive, chrome-covered beasts with engines that roared like thunder. These cars drank gasoline greedily, but no one cared. Gas was cheap. Gas was endless. Highways stretched across the land like new rivers. President Eisenhower's interstate system stitched together states with smooth asphalt, promising Americans that the road itself was freedom. Billboards along the highways didn't sell gasoline, they sold adventure. Families could pile into a station wagon, drive across 3 states, and never once worry about whether a pump would be waiting at the next exit. Detroit was booming. On the factory floors of Ford and General Motors, men in grease-stained overalls built cars the size of living rooms. Executives toasted record profits. Advertisers promised that horsepower equaled happiness. And Americans believed them. But by the late 1960s, the math was shifting. Domestic oil production peaked and began to fall. Demand, however, kept climbing, not only for cars but for heating, electricity, plastics, and airplanes. America, once proud of its self-sufficiency, now turned more and more to the oil fields of the Middle East. At first, no one noticed. Tankers arrived quietly at American ports, offloading crude that fed the refineries. Prices stayed low, and the pumps stayed full. The nation's dependency grew in silence, hidden beneath the roar of V8 engines. Meanwhile, in faraway deserts, leaders of oil-rich nations were watching. For decades, they had been treated as suppliers, their resources managed by Western corporations known as the Seven Sisters. But times were changing. Populations were rising. National pride was swelling. And within OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, a realization took root. Oil was not just a commodity. It was leverage. By 1973, that leverage was about to be used. And America, distracted by politics at home and war abroad, never saw the trap closing. By November of 1973, the American highway, once a symbol of freedom, had turned into a stage of frustration and rage. In Queens, New York, drivers lined up before sunrise, headlights glowing in the dark. They clutched newspapers under their arms, scanning headlines. OPEC cuts oil again. Gas shortages worsen. The line wrapped around 3 city blocks. Horns blared when someone tried to squeeze in. A fistfight broke out near the pump. Police had to step in. In California, mothers bundled children in pajamas and loaded them into the back seat, waiting hours just to get a few gallons. Fathers sat in lawn chairs beside their cars, thermoses of coffee steaming in the cool morning air. The smell of exhaust hung heavy as engines idled endlessly. In Pennsylvania, one gas station posted a hand-painted sign, "Limit 10 gallons per driver." The attendant, exhausted, faced a crowd of angry men demanding more. "I don't make the rules," he repeated again and again, his voice breaking. Someone threw a bottle. Glass shattered on the pavement. And in Washington, D.C., truckers staged blockades on the interstates. Long-haul rigs parked across lanes, horns blaring in protest. Signs taped to their windshields read, "NO fuel, NO food." Without diesel, deliveries stalled. Grocery store shelves grew bare. The crisis was no longer an inconvenience, it was a threat to daily survival. President Richard Nixon appeared on television, his expression tight. He urged conservation, asking Americans to lower thermostats and drive less. He announced a new program, odd-even rationing. Cars with odd-numbered license plates could buy gas on odd days, even plates on even days. For millions, life became a calendar game. But rationing didn't ease the anger. In Brooklyn, a man pulled a gun on another driver who tried to cut the line. In Ohio, 2 men fought with tire irons. In Maryland, one station was set on fire after running dry. For the first time in generations, Americans felt what it meant to be powerless. They had built their lives on the assumption that fuel would always flow. And now, for the first time, the pumps hissed empty. The embargo was not just about oil. It was about control. And the world was watching. The oil embargo rippled through the American economy like shockwaves after an earthquake. Prices that had once crept up quietly now leapt like wild flames. A gallon of gasoline that had cost less than 40 cents soared past 60, then 80, then more. Heating oil doubled. Food costs followed, as transportation ground to a crawl. Families who once lived in comfort now clipped coupons, dimmed lights, and rationed groceries. In small towns, parents skipped meals so their children could eat. In cities, long commutes turned into desperate calculations. Was there enough fuel to get to work and back? Factories slowed, then stopped. In Detroit, vast parking lots filled with unsold cars, their chrome reflecting gray winter skies. Those big, beautiful machines, symbols of American success, had become unsellable relics. Auto workers, proud men who had built their lives on the rhythm of assembly lines, were laid off by the thousands. And then came the word that haunted a generation: stagflation. Prices soared while jobs disappeared. Economists had once sworn this was impossible. Now it was daily reality. Beyond America, the world bent to a new order. In Europe and Japan, even more dependent on imported oil, the crisis hit harder. Governments pleaded with OPEC, begging for relief. Meanwhile, in Riyadh, Tehran, and Kuwait City, oil revenues flowed like rivers of gold. Palaces rose in deserts. Highways cut through dunes. Towers of glass and steel climbed where tents had once stood. For the first time in history, the balance of global power tilted on its axis. Oil was no longer just energy, it was a weapon, and the nations that controlled it discovered they could humble superpowers. In Washington, fear bled into politics. Leaders rushed to find answers. Emergency measures included creating a strategic petroleum reserve, pushing fuel efficiency standards, even lowering the national speed limit to 55 miles per hour. But behind every new law was the same uncomfortable truth. America was no longer fully in control of its own destiny. The embargo had exposed a weakness no army ever could. It showed that power could be drained not by bullets or bombs, but by the turn of a valve. By the spring of 1974, the embargo began to ease. Shipments resumed, and gas stations once again glowed at night with the steady hum of fuel pumps. Lines shortened, tempers cooled, but America was not the same. Something had shifted deep in the nation's soul. The crisis had left scars. Families remembered the nights waiting for fuel, the frustration of empty tanks, the humiliation of ration cards. Businesses never forgot the losses. Politicians, once confident in America's endless abundance, now spoke with a hint of caution. The illusion of invulnerability had shattered. From Washington came reforms meant to prevent another shock. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve was established, a vast underground network of salt caverns filled with crude oil, a hidden shield for future emergencies. Congress passed laws forcing automakers to build more fuel-efficient cars. The national speed limit dropped to 55 miles per hour, not for safety, but to conserve energy. For the first time, energy policy became a matter of national security. But the deeper lesson was harder to swallow. America had built its prosperity on a foundation it did not fully control. The suburban dream, the sprawling highways, the endless appetite for bigger and faster. All of it rested on oil flowing from distant lands through fragile alliances across oceans. When that flow stopped, even for a few months, the entire system cracked. The rest of the world learned as well. OPEC emerged as a new geopolitical force. The Middle East, once dismissed as a supplier, now stood at the center of global power. Petrodollars reshaped its cities, its politics, its future. The world had entered a new era, one where oil dictated the pace of history. And for America, the memory of 1973 lingered. Every price spike at the pump, every conflict in an oil-producing region, every debate about energy independence carried the ghost of that winter. The story of the oil crisis was more than economics. It was a warning, a reminder that even the mightiest nation can be humbled when it forgets how fragile its foundations truly are. In the end, the crisis taught a simple truth. Power is not only measured in armies or weapons, but in the fuel that keeps engines running. And in 1973, gasoline was worth more than gold.